It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
A day of infamy in Russia, but just like Pearl Harbor, the response will be swift and terrible. Indeed, already is swift and terrible. And just like after Pearl Harbor, the end result can be in no doubt. The unconditional surrender of those now celebrating their acts of criminal terrorism in Russia today. 4 bridges blown up down on top of trains full of passengers, including children. And 4 nuclear bombers of the Russian Air Force destroyed by drones brought in by people posing in civilian dress and firing them out of log cabins. A considerable war propaganda coup, though one that only changes the course of the conflict to the detriment of those fools now celebrating. The talks, peace talks, begin again in Istanbul tomorrow. Wouldn't you just like to be a fly on the wall? And as the once ruling Conservatives in Britain fall into 4th place in the opinion polls, we take a look at Britain in particular. What happened in Liverpool? Or should I put it this way? What really happened in Liverpool last week? It's all coming up over the next 2 hours. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Targeting civilians on a civilian train is an act of terrorism, and the Ukrainian regime know that, and moreover, their NATO masters know it. That means the governments in London, in Paris, in Berlin, and in Washington know that these acts are acts of terrorism. They are war crimes. They are crimes against humanity. The bombing of the nuclear strategic bombing Tu airplanes in the 5 targeted Russian air bases is not in itself terrorism. Until you look at the way in which these drones were delivered, there's a suspicion that some of them were launched from Finland and Norway, which, if true, will be of enormous magnitude. But most of them were launched from log cabins or the back of trucks that had been driven by people wearing civilian clothes across Russia in order to place them close to these strategic nuclear facilities. Now, wearing civilian clothes to commit acts of war is, of course, a war crime. It renders the belligerent stripped of the protections of the Geneva Convention. They can be executed if they are caught. But there's no doubt that it has provided a very useful war propaganda, armed war propaganda for the Ukrainian side, and their paid cohorts of NAFO fools and fellas are, of course, celebrating on social media. I thought I had gotten rid of all of them, but I've just had to block 20 or 30 more. But they'll be laughing on the other side of their face, or rather, the poor people of Ukraine, because the NAFO people are never in Ukraine. They don't even claim to be in Ukraine. They're just in the pay of those who are paying for the war in Ukraine. But the people in Ukraine are right now under incredible barrage of ballistic missiles, and maybe more to come. Maybe we'll get another viewing of the terrifying power of the Oroshenk missile, against which no defense in the world is yet available. The response to what happened today, when 4 nuclear bombers were set on fire, presumed destroyed, definitely an insurance write-off, is good propaganda, but of course it will change nothing in the course of the war. Russia has thousands of bombers, and it has thousands and thousands of very powerful weapons, including, of course, 1,500 operational nuclear missiles. It has battlefield nuclear weapons. It has the Oroshenk, and it has in total more than 4,500 nuclear bombs. I'm making these points not out of any love of war pornography, for I have none. That is not an affliction I have ever had. I've been in too many war zones for that. But to make the next point that I want to express, if anybody destroyed 4 United States Air Force nuclear bombers, what do you think would be the result? What do you think the United States would do to any country, any belligerent that broke the nuclear threshold, broached the inner sanctum of the nuclear doctrine of the United States of America? You just have to ask yourself that question, and you already know the answer. And the Ukraine will be getting that answer right now and in hours and days to come. Of that I have no doubt. But it undoubtedly will strengthen measurably those in the Kremlin who believe there's been far too much pussyfooting around in this war, and that it risks the loss of more life, not less, to wear kid gloves, to avoid taking out the leadership of Ukraine and taking out the essential infrastructure of Ukraine. I just give you this example. On the day when 4 attacks were made on 4 separate railway bridges in Russia, There are 17 bridges across the river Dnipro. Russia has not destroyed a single one of them, though they could destroy all 17 of them right now in the next 60 minutes. That they have not done so is a testament to either the strategic patience of Vladimir Putin or the naivety of Vladimir Putin, always hoping that by minimizing the impact of the war on essential infrastructure used by civilians as well as military, that Russia could take the moral high ground, Russia could be the good guy in this conflict. But if you're bringing down railway bridges on passengers and crew, the entire crew of the train in Bryansk were all wiped out. Every railway worker on the train was wiped out by the terrorist attack on the bridge. The fact that the other side is now abandoning all caution, is now firing Storm Shadow missiles supplied by France this day into Donetsk, a part of Novorossiya, a part of Russia. French missiles fired into it today, killing and maiming civilian people. The fact that the other side is infiltrating people dressed as civilians, as terrorist belligerents, to fire drones at your nuclear task force is, of course, a spear at the heart of the Russian Federation. It is actually, I hate to use the word because it has real implications. It is an existential threat to the Russian Federation because the Russian Federation's nuclear doctrine says that it is. Any attack on our strategic forces will be opening the attacker up to a strategic response. Any country with nuclear weapons has that in their nuclear doctrine. Because once the parity of nuclear force is broken on one side, the opportunity for others to existentially destroy that nuclear power is obviously there. So the impact on the talks tomorrow in Istanbul, you don't need to be Einstein to work them out. Here's my best guess. It is only a guess. It might be that Putin's strategic patience will endure, although I doubt it. But it could happen. But I suspect that the Russian negotiators who are already in Istanbul will table a simple demand of the Ukrainian armed forces through their representative in the talks for the complete withdrawal of all Ukrainian forces from all of the territories of Novorossiya, the immediate creation of a buffer zone around Ukraine between the borders of Russia and Ukraine must now be created, and Ukrainian neutrality and denazification be immediately proceeded with, followed, I'm sure, by the demand for the departure of Zelensky and the crew who launched these attacks today. Of course, at that point, the Ukrainian delegation will withdraw and they will seek further and better help from their NATO allies. Unlikely to be the United States, but definitely London and Paris. In London, the defense minister, an inky-fingered clerk with no discernible knowledge or background or experience in defense policy at all, a man, I'll remind you, called John Healey because you've never heard of him before. A man who wouldn't be appointed to run the quartermaster store at a minor army base. He's your war leader. Look at him. Take a good look at him. Who knows? he might be the last face that you ever look upon. John Healey gave a speech, I think that's what they call them. I should say rather, he read out a piece of paper at the Rusi Royal United Services Institute in London today, in which he declared that Britain was preparing for war against Russia. And moreover, that we were going to build six new arms factories. I wonder how long they would survive any outbreak of hostility. You see, it's my melancholy duty to remind my fellow countrymen that the entirety of the British Isles, its entirety, every square mile of it, can be reduced to ashes, cinders, with everything that was alive in it then dead, by one Russian hypersonic nuclear missile with 8 warheads, splitting up, spreading across the country and destroying everything in their path. 6 arms factories. I wonder where they got the money for that, given that they cannot afford to pay our disabled people the benefits that Keir Starmer formerly described as being morally repugnant to cut them. He's cutting them. The cold weather payments to our pensioners that Starmer regularly accused his predecessor of preparing to scrap, he scrapped them. We have no money, but we give billions to Ukraine. We have no money, but we build 6 new arms factories. This madness of the British government is taking us all the way to Armageddon. Now, I know that Keir Starmer feels deeply about Ukraine. I'm probing it all the time. I'm probing his close relations with Ukraine and with Ukrainians all the time. But this is a backdoor way of taking us into Armageddon. Britain has made itself the #1 enemy of the Russian Federation. There are many people in Moscow. I have no knowledge of it, but there are many people in Moscow who believe that the British state was involved in this terrorism in Ukraine today. If a shooting war breaks out between Russia and NATO, I warn my fellow countrymen of this: Britain is the #1 target. If nothing else happens in that shooting war, there will be no British person left alive. There will be no 2 stones stood upon each other in any town or city in the United Kingdom. And then the radiation, which will roll out across the countryside, and then the nuclear winter, under which everything that is alive will perish. These are the stakes that we are currently playing for. Now, I don't expect that Russia will respond to today's attacks with a nuclear weapon, though they would be fully entitled to under their own nuclear doctrine and under the obvious realpolitik that any nuclear armed country would follow. If somebody attacks your nuclear weapons, you must respond with nuclear weapons, or your nuclear parity with your adversaries is over. But I do expect that the response will be, as I said, swift and terrible. We'll hear from Chay Bowes in Moscow in just a minute or two about what the atmosphere is like there. But I want to have some time to discuss something that has been troubling me over these last few days. Believe me, I never wanted to climb into this rabbit hole. It seemed to me that the madness that took place at the Victory Parade in Liverpool was just that, madness. First, like everyone else, I feared that it was a terrorist attack. I feared that the driver would be revealed as Mohammed this or Abdul that. I feared that he'd have a black face or a brown face. I don't hide from you that I was relieved when the police indicated in an unusual, unprecedented statement that the person arrested at the scene was white, was British, and was local. But the more I've looked at it, the more I realize that something is not right, and that there are important questions that still have not been answered. There's a picture of the driver of the car at the wheel. There's another picture released by the authorities of what they claim to be the same man, except it quite plainly is not the same man. And the court artists in Britain, you're not allowed to take pictures in court, but an artist can make a drawing. And the drawing looked nothing like the actual driver of the car, or the man we've just shown you, or the man who was actually at the wheel. But that's not the end of these strange events. Is his name Paul Doyle? Is his name Jean-Paul Doyle? Is he a former Royal Marine, Special Forces, British soldier? Or is he a former BlackRock employee? Blackwater, I beg your pardon, the former mercenary giant. Was he with Blackwater? Was he with the Royal Marines? Was he with both? These are questions that deserve an answer, because if it's one or the other or both, that gives a profile to the alleged would-be assassin that is intriguing indeed. But even that is not the only strange thing. Who were the snipers on the roof in Liverpool above the parade? Why were they not wearing uniforms of any kind? Why were they not wearing police uniforms? Why were they not wearing British Army uniforms? Why were, and Warren Thornton, an acquaintance of the show, a former sniper in the army himself, makes the point very powerfully that you can't have two snipers and no spotter. You can't have one sniper and no spotter. A spotter with binoculars is an essential accompaniment to a sniper. It should be two snipers, two spotters. But there are only two people on the roof, and both of them are looking through the sights of weapons. Who were they? And why were they there? Is it normal in Britain for a football victory parade to be overlooked by armed snipers without uniforms? And lastly, why did Grok try to tell us that that picture we've just shown you was in fact not in Liverpool, but in London, and years old from the siege of the Iranian embassy? Do they think Liverpool people don't know what Liverpool looks like? Do they think London people don't know what Lancaster Gate looks like? And when it was pointed out that the River Mersey was clearly visible in the pictures, Grok said, that's not the River Mersey, that is the Serpentine Lake in Hyde Park in London. Is Grok stupid? Or does it think we are stupid? I want to know more about what happened in Liverpool and why all these discrepancies have been allowed to spread like wildfire through social media, completely undermining the police's presumed initial intention of not allowing this particular act of lunacy to be as corrosive and dangerous as previous acts of lunacy in England have recently been. Chay Bowes is up next. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
What a great show this is! I listened to it, I thought, wow, what a great show. I've called into your show today, George, because I'm a great caller. Probably the greatest caller you've ever had. I really am. The only way your show could be better is if it had more of me, Donald J. Trump, in it. You keep talking about me, George. You do. I've heard it, I have. So many of the American people, the best people, listen to your show. And I've heard them crying about me. I have, and I listen and I go, ooh, America, don't cry. Don't cry. You need to be careful what you say about me, George. You don't want me to put a tariff on your show like I did with China. And then you'll come running for my help, just like little Zelensky. You know, I know you will. I know these things. Make the mother of all talk shows great again. That's why we're here. That's what we're gonna do, George. We're gonna boost your ratings. Donald is gonna boost them bigly. I'm giving your show the Trump bump. You're welcome, George. Thank me. And remember, nobody talks like me. Nobody calls like me. And absolutely nobody ends a phone call like me. I'm hanging up now. Not because I finished, but because I won.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
This may be the closest poll we've ever run. Will Farage be the next Prime Minister, yes or no? Well, on Telegram, it's exactly 50-50. On X, it is 54-46. On the YouTube community poll, it's 58-42. And on the YouTube stream, it's 51-49. Will Farage be the next Prime Minister? Get voting if you want to influence that result. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland. 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044203 966 2625. Now, Chay Bowes, a great friend of the show, was already one of my heroes. But he's especially so now because he's come on the show despite 2 nights without being asleep. He was called out to report on the terrorist attack on the bridge in Bryansk and witness the terrible, awful casualties and destruction wrought by that terrorist explosion. And he's been working on that story flat out, but he's definitely across what else happened today, which, if anything, is even more serious. And he's agreed to be with us tonight. Chay Bowes, very warm welcome and a big thanks for exceptionally making this time for us. I'll try not to keep you for long. First of all, tell us about what happened at the bridge and how many bridges were blown up by terrorist action over the last 24 hours.
Well, George, thanks. Again, thanks for having me on. Your show is an exceptionally important platform for people who want to share, the other side's view. It's a remarkably important thing, and it deserves all support that anyone can give it. So I'm in Bryansk. I came here, as soon as I heard the news, I was dispatched here, and I was the first reporter on the scene, if you like, of the actual catastrophe. It was the only thing you can call it. There were 2 bridges that came down last night, about 24 hours ago, a little more. One in the Kursk region, which adjoins Bryansk, where I am, and one here in Bryansk. Now, these areas of Russia, south of Moscow, are very close to Ukraine, of course, and are very liable to infiltration from Ukrainian DRGs or disruption groups, saboteur groups from the Ukrainian military. And not so long ago, about 4 kilometers from the bridge, one of these groups was engaged with by the Russian security forces, and firefights opened up about 3-4 days before this bridge came down. Many people are suggesting that these may have been the people responsible. The scene I came across was shocking. I mean, in this job, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of conflict. I've seen a lot of human trauma. But this was just on a scale of a war zone. The train had been essentially upended. The engine, as you mentioned earlier, carrying the crew, had been completely crushed, maybe to within half a meter. It was impossible to survive that. I posted a video of what I saw online on my X channel. People are free to have a look. Very shocking. A huge response from the Russian emergencies ministry. About 180 people went there to assist. Very luckily, there was a very small roadway running alongside the track at that point. You can see that in the video. Very difficult terrain. The start of the summer here in Russia, people making their way to Moscow, absolutely no military use for this rail line. These are just ordinary people, children, babies. One 8-month-old baby critically ill now in Moscow, flown to Moscow with critical injuries. You could be heard screaming inside one of the carriages as it was trapped there. The horror of this is remarkable. Anybody from London 7-7, these assaults that have happened on ordinary civilians should be acutely aware of what is being done, potentially in their name, and who's funding it and who's the architect of it. A very traumatic day for us to witness that, feel a little bit helpless to see it. But it's also it makes you feel quite angry. It makes you feel quite angry about the narrative within the Western media, BBC, CNN, the client media, as I like to call them, and as you are more than familiar with, that this is 2 bridges collapsed, despite the fact that the SBU admitted in the last 24 hours blowing up a bridge in Melitopol in Donbass, in Donetsk, that region. And this stuff has happened before. We know how they're operating. This was quite an isolated stretch of railway. To suggest that this bridge fell, a very modern-looking bridge, just collapsed on a train at the exact moment that train was going underneath it, or in the other case in Kursk, that this freight train that was blown up essentially just so happened, and they both so happened to happen within hours of each other, is fanciful, to use the term Oscar Wilde was fond of. And of course, it comes in the context, as you say, of a lot of other things happening here in Russia in relation to what happens next in Ukraine.
Well, let's turn to that, not in any way to diminish the horror of what you witnessed and reported on peerlessly. The attack and the apparent destruction of 4 Russian Air Force nuclear bombers. I don't know if they were actually totally destroyed, but if I was an insurance broker, I'd definitely be expecting a write-off on 4 essential parts of Russia's nuclear defense force. Now, no nuclear-armed country can tolerate an attack on its nuclear force because that potentially changes the nuclear parity with adversaries and leaves the country open to complete destruction. So it's a very, very serious matter to attack aircraft that are nuclear capable and could even have been nuclear armed, but weren't, thank God. This is being hailed by the propagandists of the Ukraine as a turning point. I'm sure that it is, but probably not in the way they hope it is. What's your take on that, Chay?
Well, I don't think anything happens by accident when it comes to what's happened in Ukraine, particularly actions within Russia. So this strike, or this attempted strike on, I think, 4 Russian strategic bomber bases. Only one, maybe two, had any kind of impact. We think objective observers say that the maximum of 6 aircraft have been impacted, probably 4 damaged, maybe destroyed. We don't know. Several of the other attacks were thwarted. The drones were shot down or disabled by electronic warfare. This doesn't happen by accident. This is being portrayed by Ukraine as, we told you so. We told you to have a ceasefire. We demanded it of you, that you would commit to a ceasefire unconditionally, despite the fact that you're winning, advancing at the most rapid pace in Donbass in several years of war, essentially. That Russia would be, in some ludicrous reality, obliged to agree to a ceasefire with a country openly sponsoring the assassination of senior military figures, journalists, threatening other journalists, myself included, with death on a daily basis. So this idea, this fanciful notion that Russia is obliged to engage with Mr. Zelensky's regime is remarkable, quite remarkable. A man going into probably the 7th year of his term as a president, a 5-year presidency, quite remarkable. But it doesn't happen by accident. I think that's what's important for the viewers, that this operation was highly technical. It was a long time in the planning. And it struck at a very, very, as you say, pertinent part of Russia's nuclear triad, which is quite remarkable. Can you imagine a Mexican drugs gang doing exactly the same thing to American strategic bombers? Because the other reality of this is these actions and these tactics can be deployed by anybody with access to drones, the internet, a lorry, and some explosives. Remember, this is not that complicated. It was audacious and it was successful to a degree in PR, but that's about it. Because remember, Russia has well over 70 strategic nuclear bombers. 4 have probably been damaged, maybe lost. Even if they were, they can be recreated. And they will be done. Same with the fleet in the Black Sea. Ukraine, remember, was briefly winning the war in Ukraine because it had sank several Russian ships in the Black Sea. We're not hearing about that anymore. Ukraine was also winning the war when it invaded Kursk in a catastrophic suicide mission, which cost the lives of probably 100,000 men and incalculable material and war treasure. They were also winning then, remember, all forgotten. They were winning in 2023 when they embarked on this cataclysmic counteroffensive, which was going to drive the Russians out of Crimea. So you have to take this stuff with a pinch of salt. It might be something of a PR victory. And as you say, with the completely delusional think tank fantasists online talking about the entire nuclear arsenal Russia is now equipped, it's almost laughable. I think what this is about and the fingerprints, the DNA of another foreign power are certainly all over this. We know that the British government is intimately related to the SBU, who have claimed responsibility for this. Mr. Budanov, the head of one element of that, awarded a medal by the Polish government this week, quite remarkably. And at the same time, Mr. Duda was telling us that the OUN UPA, who are idolized in Ukraine, are Nazis and war criminals. So there's a remarkable psychosis at the moment around Ukraine. We know that Mr. Merz doesn't really want to arm Ukraine with long-range weapons. So he comes up with this almost Arthurian myth that he's going to fund the development of a long-range Ukrainian weapon, with which to strike Moscow. This is, again, obfuscation of a responsibility, when very quickly Russia said that if you did that, we would be obliged to strike the places of origin of those weapons. It's a very cynical move. And again, we're back again where we always seem to be, George, with the reality that in the West, the only energy of forward motion seems to be escalation. There's no real engagement, remember, from Europe or the British with the Russians. They're not really involved. They talk to each other, but they don't talk to the Russians. And this belief that they can force Russia's hand into some sort of radical escalatory move by doing this kind of thing, hoping Russia might do something out of character. The Russians will not do that. There'll be no nuclear strike from Russia. There'll be no strike on London or anywhere else at this stage, because the Russians understand the game that they're being forced into playing. And I don't think Mr. Putin is going to sing his lines according to what's written from in Whitehall or Washington. It's very clear that Russia is winning on the battlefield in Donbass day by day. There's less and less of Ukraine to argue about at the talks. The talks tomorrow will be very, very interesting, of course. And we await to see what, if anything, comes from them. Hard to see when you would expect some sort of military response from Russia. But I think that response, again, will be measured to the frustration of many in Russia and to the frustration of many watching. But again, if you step back and have a look at this, why would Mr. Putin play a role written from in Whitehall or in Washington? I don't think it's going to happen, George.
Is it being reported in Russia now that a response is underway? Because on social media, it's full of Excalibur missiles raining down on Kiev. There's air raid sirens going off throughout the country. Do you expect a larger than usual response to this particularly egregious act?
Well, George, you know the Russians somewhat. I know them a little better after living and working among them. But as Mr. Churchill said, enigma wrapped in an enigma. I always get this analogy wrong, but they're not prone to drama. They're not prone to theatre. And as I say, they will step back and look at this. They will find who was responsible. They will draw up a response, and it will be Mr. Putin himself and his Security Council, I'm sure, not that I'd be privy to that, will make that decision. And it is the difference between chaos and stability that the world has to thank Mr. Putin for, in my view. An exceptionally calm leader who is remarkably constrained and restrained. And the enemies of Russia know that there's a growing resolve in Russia to fight this war to its natural conclusion on the battlefield. So this is also an interesting stratagem by them to try and put pressure on the Russian government to act in what would be very popular in Russia, to strike decision-making centers maybe. There's a lot of senior political figures and media commentators speak in that way. But I still think Mr. Putin will maintain direction. And he's done this since he sat in front of us in 2022 and said they will denazify Ukraine and they will demilitarize Ukraine. That's happening day by day on the ground. Planes can be rebuilt, tanks can be rebuilt, but territory once held by Russia is very difficult to take back, and that I think is the priority of the Russians right now. I think there will be a response, and I think, remember, this is also something that the Ukrainians can probably do once. It's like the famous party trick of being able to make your head blow up. You can only do it once, because the Russians will now tighten everything, just like they did with Storm Shadow, ATACMS, everything else. The Russians learn very quickly, and in war they become masterful at the game of war, about understanding how to counter these threats. And I think this is now one more trick the Ukrainians won't be able to pull off. 4 damaged planes, even if 4 to 10 of them were destroyed, Russia has 70 of these long-range nuclear missile carriers. They can manufacture many more. And anyway, these would not probably be used to deliver any kind of significant role in a nuclear conflict with the West, as that would be from a Starmer missile deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, completely unknown to anybody except probably Mr. Putin and a select few. So the relevance of this, it's a PR victory in the minds of people who want to discount the failed counteroffensive, want to discount the catastrophe incurred, want to discount the fact that Ukraine is a dictatorship dragging its own people off the street. But elsewhere, it's seen as what it is, an act of desperation and an attempt to make Russia act in a very irresponsible, aggressive, knee-jerk manner. And I just don't see them doing that. As unpopular as it might be within Russia right now after what's happened over the last 24, 48 hours, I think Mr. Putin will stick to his guns and continue on mission.
Finally and briefly, because I know you need to get to sleep, there's a fella called Johnheeley. I've known him for decades. You'd be forgiven for never having heard his name before. I called him earlier an inky-fingered clerk. And that's what he always seemed to me to be like. You wouldn't have put him in charge of a quartermaster's store in a small army base anywhere. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating. But he was at the Rusi rostrum, I think yesterday, reported today, saying that Britain was preparing for war with Russia. It's kind of like the flea on the arse of the elephant, warning the elephant it's going to get it. How do people in Russia, I'm sure they've never heard of John Healey, but what do they think of Britain?
Well, interestingly, George, as you'll know, having spent some time in Russia, the Russians are exceptionally fond of the ordinary British people, very fond of them, very interested in British culture, as they are in Irish culture. Irish dancing, very popular here. London, a beloved city among the Russians. So there's a sense of dismay and bemusement among ordinary Russians as to why the British have suddenly declared war on Russia. I mean, they don't share a land border. I mean, I think what the Russians believe, and again, as you know, the Russians are exceptionally well educated politically, from the taxi driver to the politician. They see Russia or the UK as an empire in decline, scrambling for relevance, particularly now that it's away from the table in the European Union. Another increasingly irrelevant and desperate organization. So it's a war of distraction. It's a war of fear, of justification, because remember, Russia has very clearly shown in Ukraine that despite an amalgam of 55 countries and the entirety of NATO and the entirety of NATO's manufacturing capacity, Russia is still advancing. The war isn't over. 17,000 sanctions against Russia. It isn't working. They have failed in Ukraine. NATO has failed. NATO is a very fractious organization where Greece and Turkey are both members, but who would be obliged to invade each other if one invaded the other on the island of Cyprus, remember, George. It's a ludicrous situation. And the failure in Ukraine to end Russia's determined push to denazify and demilitarize this junta in Kiev demonstrates that. So what is the way out of this to accept? You're a seasoned politician. Do you expect anybody to stand up in the British Parliament and say, look, we got it completely wrong following our American colleagues into this catastrophic proxy war in on the other side of the continent? Of course they're not going to do that. They can't do it. No more than Mrs. von der Leyen can do it, and expose the egregious lack of foresight and obligation to the welfare of Europeans. Much as Mr. Starmer, as you very correctly say, this pernicious man who has declared not enough money for pensioners' fuel. He's tried to backtrack on it now, but there's plenty of money for new weapons, 6 weapons factories. The Russians, remember, manufacture more artillery shells, for example, heavy artillery, tanks, and fighter jets probably than the entirety of NATO does, 4 times over. 4 times. That's from Washington to Istanbul, imagine. The Russians manufacture 4 times more, maybe more. It will take decades and decades for them to even reach any kind of remote parity. That's an exceptionally important thing. This is all talk. Britain, by the way, had about 200 aging Challenger tanks at the start of the Ukraine, this phase of the conflict in Ukraine. It gave, I think, a dozen of them to Ukraine. Several were destroyed very rapidly by the Russians, and they were secretly and very quietly pulled away from the front. Britain has less than a battalion of battle tanks. It has less than 100,000 men in any kind of capacity to fight a war. It has no military manufacturing capacity. Its navy is in a lot of trouble. And it's a society which is exceptionally unlikely to volunteer its young manhood and women to die in a war for a man who seems to be the most unpopular politician that's ever graced the House of Parliament in a generation. Why on earth would Britain's young people stir themselves from the monotony of trying to survive in an increasingly fractious society to go and die in a war for Keir Starmer? If anyone can answer that question, I'd be delighted to hear the answer.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Get some sleep, Chay, and thanks very much for joining us. Much obliged to you. Now, will Farage be the next Prime Minister? Yes or no? Getting on for 20,000 people have voted. and it is exceedingly close. Actually, the no's are catching up quickly with the yeses. Let me take a quick break, and then it's your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Farage be the next Prime Minister? You can decide yes or no on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Let's go all the way to Switzerland for the first call, where Adrian wants to respond to Chay Bowes' interview on Palestine, though, as well as on Ukraine. Adrian, most welcome. What would you like to say?
Hello, George. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you also, your team. They are wonderful. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the phone with you. So actually, I'm going to speak about both Ukraine and Palestine. And I'm going to start actually with Ukraine, because I think everything actually is connected. And I think it has been all connected for a long time now. But actually, I have been studying the whole situation, the whole perspective on the world, starting with this COVID situation. So first of all, I want to start with Ukraine, and mostly I want to speak about Zelensky. And I want to say that in antithesis with what is happening in Gaza, here we have a different kind of war. And although you presented the situation, and it is true, it can escalate in that magnitude, I think we will have a different kind of result. Why? First of all, I wanted to focus a little bit because from the beginning, this Zelensky character, I had a little bit of opportunity to be with some individuals which were, I have some kind of sources about his private life before being a president. And this is actually very important because this individual, which was like a stripper, and we also have this kind of video clips in YouTube where he's like with the belly dancing there and making all his kind of clown behavior. He's clearly an individual which is no figure of a state. So that's from the beginning. And the plays, of course, are being made by the U.S. and and also from Israel for sure. Now the thing is that what I see here is actually. All the important people fled all over Europe. Everybody was with their little Ukrainian flag on the Facebooks. And actually, I do not quite understand why actually has been so long. Because if Putin would have been doing his military work there properly, as everyone and many Scott Ryder, many people said, should have been over a long time ago. So all this delay, I do not quite understand why. I can surely understand it's about business. This is no mystery to nobody. But of course, still the innocent people there lost their lives in comparison with the rich, which all went all over. In Switzerland, I have seen here many people were gathering them in their houses. They had free transport all over the place. Everybody normally has to pay for this general abonnement, we say here in Germany, in Switzerland, and they were everyone free. So everybody treated them like kings. Now, On the other hand, when someone sees now the Palestinian flags, which in my opinion, these people are the oppressed party, now everybody is like, oh no, we have to close the eyes here. Of course, because Ukraine as Israel, they are in the same team. And this is what actually I wanted also to say, which is sad for me. I see actually that there are no more sides in the game. Sometimes, and I want to tell you, and this is actually a debate in a way with you, I see that even Putin somehow doesn't quite play like he should have played if the game would have been correctly. Because if the game would have been correctly, he would have finished this war. He would have finished the war. But he doesn't for 3 years or whatever is happening now. And that was actually the question mark that I had and started because when you look in the political spectrum in U.S., there is no more left and there is no more right. They are both under AIPAC, both parties, and both political sides. There is no more this. I mean, for a long time, and you know it better than me because my respect towards you is immense. All right, now with Ukraine, I don't know exactly what is going to happen. I don't think he's going to dare to bomb anything in the UK. I mean, I do not see this really. I do not see it coming. And Keir Starmer, man, that guy, and I love how you speak about him. I have never in my life seen a person without a backbone like this individual. And by the way, also this Zelensky was one of those Ukrainians, like you say, and I like very much, because that guy was dancing at the parties of very big individuals, very important, from Russia, actually. So, coming back now to my important part, because I have been actually, I'm a tough guy, but I have been crying, really, I'm not kidding you, man. I have been crying about these poor children in Gaza, and you said also once a story about a little girl going with a jar of water and never returning back to the tent, and that actually, I have seen many cases like that. So, actually, I have lost also a child, and I have also a boy now, and I know really what that means. So that's why I care for these people. What I wanted to say was, what is going to happen when this genocide is going to end? Because the thing is that we are concentrated on the war, which war was, of course, you have an oppressor, which is the Israeli Zionists, and you have a resistance. In this case here, is like over 90% of Gaza infrastructure is gone. So we are talking about thousands which are homeless. Israel declared in a couple of interviews with Yama, there is a very cool reporter from Norway, and he asked a very, very pertinent question. He said, who is going to take responsibility for the rebuild of the Gaza? And of course, they did not say anything. And
the Arab leaders have said that they will rebuild it. You can make your own mind up whether that's a check that you'd be comfortable receiving. But they've said that they will. It's a very tiny area. If you deployed enough capital, you could detoxify the greenhouse gases are 5 times the entire world's emission over the last 12 months. And oddly, you never hear any Greens talking about that particular angle. They'd prefer to stop cows from farting than do anything at all about the fact that 5 times the normal annual output of greenhouse gases has been unleashed by the destruction in Gaza. But it's a small area, and if you deployed enough money and enough labor, technical specialized labor, you could detoxify it and you could rebuild it one block at a time. But that presupposes that the genocide will stop. And I'm not entirely sure that this genocide will ever stop before it achieves its goal of the total removal, the extermination of 2.25 million Palestinians in Gaza. If not their extermination, then their headlong flight into the deserts of Egypt, which is the only conceivable way that you could transfer the population. You can't put them on a railway truck, for there is no railway. You can't bus them up through occupied Palestine to Syria, even if the people were prepared to get on the buses. The optics of all of these things are simply intolerable for those who continue to arm and to shill for the state of Israel. Whatever backtracking they've done recently, they still are essential pillars of the apartheid state. So the only outcome that can quickly be achieved with the minimum of transportation necessary is literally to start mass execution of the Palestinians in the south of Gaza and open the gates of Rafah at the same time so that they run away from their execution. The resistance has offered to abolish itself. Yes, Hamas has said that they will literally abolish themselves as a political party. They have already relinquished any claim to government of the Gaza Strip, and now they say they will disband their entire operation and hand over the keys, if keys are still necessary, to the Palestine National Authority in Ramallah. But that authority is now so bereft of authority and even less credibility that all of these are simply going past us like tumbleweed. Nothing is happening. The ceasefire we were told about during the week has been completely wrecked before it began. The murder, mass murder, is continuing. And of the cream of Palestinian society, as well as ordinary people like you and me, surgeons, doctors, teachers, lecturers, scholars of all kinds, journalists, writers, novelists, poets, are all being systematically exterminated, and deliberately so. Even a little girl, an 11-year-old girl who became an influencer on Instagram by her cheerful personality and her daily reports about what was happening to her family and around about her. They sought her out to murder her, aged 11, and they succeeded. So, of course I'm interested in what would happen after the genocide ended, but I'm not at all sure that we're in a position to end it at all. Comments on YouTube, you can scan the QR code now, leave a comment on the YouTube stream, and if it's good enough and clean enough, I'll read it out. John Conn says the EU is now a terrorist entity. And Morns Lad says today's attacks were a result of NATO desperation to avoid the ongoing humiliation of Ukraine's defeat. And Chili Pepper sends $10 US, thank you, says it's all kabuki theater, peace talks, as the US belligerent admitted that the CIA is on Ukrainian soil, striking Russia, resorting to terrorism with the help of the UK. And Toasted Heretic says, keep taking the high ground and lose. Whatever that might look like, it's not bloody pretty. And Crowhawk says, Russia will know that Ukraine didn't carry out this behavior without outside assistance. And when you get bitten by a dog, you don't sue the dog, you sue the owner. Let's take Brad in Canada for a quick call before the break. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. So I am from Canada, and one thing I've been noticing when you've been talking about the Palestinian-Israeli war is that in Canada, we don't hear about it. We did before, and then all of a sudden, we're very pro-Ukrainian, and we're not very into hearing about this. And a lot of my friends I'm trying to push and to say, you know what, we have an Israeli community here, and a lot of Israelis are pro-Palestine. They really understand that this genocide is not good. But my question was sort of answered by what would happen, but I have another question regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war. What would happen if that ceasefire, would they be able to make a good trade agreement? Would they work together? If they ceasefire, would Zelensky ultimately would ultimately go down and then a new president would come up? Like, how would that all work? Because I'm hoping on June 2nd that there is some peace, because here it's very Nazistic, where there's a lot of support and then nationalism, and it just amplified here. So it'd be nice to see some peace and more toned downness in Canada and all over the world.
Well, you've got a particularly high number of Ukrainian fascists in your country, and their descendants. Scores of thousands of Ukrainian fascists fled to Canada and were admitted there at the end of the Second World War. Not far from where I live in Scotland, there's a Ukrainian prisoner of war camp where Ukrainian fascists were kept in Scotland during the Second World War, and most of them went to Canada at the end of the Second World War, emigrated there. So you have a particularly high number of Ukrainian nationalists and fascists in your country, and that has obviously brought Canada into a great deal of disrepute. You had the entire Parliament of Canada on its feet giving a standing ovation to a man who fought the Russians during the Second World War. There are such idiots in the Canadian Parliament, they didn't realize that that meant he was fighting on the Nazi side in the Second World War, a war in which thousands of brave Canadians made the ultimate sacrifice and were martyred in the defeat of the very Nazis that this guy they were giving a standing ovation to had served amongst. He was in the SS, the Galician SS, and he got a standing ovation from the entire Parliament of Canada. The Speaker took the fall and resigned for this grotesque error, but they were all, with tears in their eyes, in a paroxysm of anti-Russian hatred, hailing a member of the Galician SS. So, to answer your question, I don't believe there will be a ceasefire. There certainly won't be a 30-day ceasefire. The only ceasefire there will be is upon ironclad commitments to Russia's war aims, which are long published and extant. And they are complete Ukrainian neutrality, with no Ukrainian membership of NATO and no presence of NATO or any of its member states in Ukraine. The denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, so that this war does not have to be fought again in a generation or so from now. The acceptance of the Russian national territory, which has been recovered and endorsed by referenda in the territory that has been liberated in the Donbass, and of course the new Russian demand for a buffer zone to avoid what happened in Kursk ever being able to happen again. So in other words, the cities of Kharkov and Odessa being effectively part of a buffer zone, not absorbed into Russia, but being a military buffer zone. Until and unless all these demands are met, there'll be no ceasefire, in my view. See if I'm right after tomorrow's talks. Now, just before the big break, big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the MOATS TV website, moats.tv website. Ray Martin, Jamie Moody, Matthew Stephen, Graham Briggs-White, a great long-standing supporter of mine, and Julian Malins. Julian, a great pleasure to see you on that distinguished list of the top donors to the mother of all talk shows. Thank you if you have given, and thank you in advance if you're going to give later tonight. Let me take a quick break, because after the break, we've got Jim Ferguson, a founder of Freedom Train International. He's a big guy on social media. His politics are not the same as mine, but hey, wouldn't life be boring if we only spoke to people whose politics were the same as ours? Let's take a break, and then it's Jim Ferguson. Stay tuned. Big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm really going to make this point as firmly as I can. Every one of you has to go to MOATS.tv and donate something, even if it is £1, even if it is $1, €1. Nothing comes for free. 2 shows a week cannot be produced for free. We need every person watching to donate at least £1, $1, €1. I can't put it more clearly than that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Farage be the next Prime Minister? Yes or no? 20,000 people have now voted. There's still about 40 minutes left to vote, but it's still a bit of a cliffhanger. I think it's the closest poll we have ever had. Jim Ferguson, founder of Freedom Train International, joins us now, I think for the first time on the mother of all talk shows. So a special welcome to you, Jim. Let's get your answer to that poll question first. Will Farage be the next Prime Minister? Yes or no?
I think he will be, George, definitely. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome. Yeah, I mean, there's a long way to go, of course. A week's a long time in politics, and the next general election, alas, is many, many weeks away. But he's now 12 points ahead of Labour, the governing party, and the Tories are in 4th place behind Sir Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats. Doesn't get much more ignominious than that, does it?
It doesn't, George, and it's not entirely surprising, having looked at the state of the Tory party over the last 14 years under successive Conservative prime ministers. But, you know, I think there is a potential real opportunity for Nigel Farage to take power. They're polling incredibly highly. And as a former colleague of Nigel in the Brexit Party, he's a pretty determined guy. He's a smart guy. He's a great orator, like you. And I think that he will probably stomp home at the next general election. But of course, you're quite correct to say a week in politics is a long time. We've got several years to go before we see that playing out, unless something very significant was to happen where there was maybe a crisis in government and an early election could be called. And that is also possible.
Yeah, although it's much more likely an early defenestration of the Prime Minister replaced by somebody almost as bad as him within the ruling party. But you've just been in Hungary, and I read your reports from there with great interest. The Prime Minister there, Viktor Oban, he has struck an increasingly isolated figure in the EU. I sometimes think he's the only leader who's actually really standing up to what has become an EU dictatorship. I mean, we always, you and I, as Brexiteers, we always said things about the European Union which other people struggled sometimes to see, but it's out in the open now that the EU is an unelected tyranny, and the government of Hungary, with the Slovakian leadership maybe in second place, are the only people standing up to it.
Absolutely right. And just before I went to Hungary, I was in Romania campaigning on behalf of George Simeon to become president. And there's all sorts of unanswered questions there as well. You know, Romania is a great country. It was my first time there. It's also my first time in Budapest, but you're quite correct. And they, in Hungary, are being fined 1 million euros per day because he doesn't follow the tune of Brussels. It is a tyranny, George. You're quite correct.
1 million euros a day. Is he paying the fine? Or is he offering what? Community service instead? Are they paying it?
Well, I believe they are resisting that. They're looking for other avenues to not do it. But, you know, I met members of the Hungarian parliament when I was there. In fact, some of them were quite senior members. And they're pretty tough, you know, they are pretty rock solid in terms of standing up for the people of Hungary. They don't want to be dictated to by the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. And, you know, when I campaigned for Brexit, when you did the same, we were absolutely united in the fact that Britain should be independent. We don't need an unelected bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels dictating what we should be doing or not doing in the United Kingdom. And indeed, there is a growing feeling across the European nations that that is unacceptable. And what we saw with the election interference in Romania, it goes to show that democracy itself is not being respected by those running the EU itself. Ursula von der Leyen and her ilk are nowhere near being democratic in their policies.
No, in fact, von der Leyen and others in the top ranks of the European Union are the grandchildren of literal Nazis. And they are behaving increasingly like them. And the Romanian case in point that you just cited, no one actually pays it all that mind, but in truth, we've never seen anything quite like this before. Simeon was so far ahead in the first ballot that Grok estimated that the percentage possibility of him losing the second ballot was less than 1%, and yet lose he did. And he was only even in the election because Georgescu, who was miles ahead in the earlier election, was disqualified by a group of judges, and the Romanian people were robbed of their right to elect him as president. Why are they so desperate to get a puppet in Romania, do you think, Jim?
Well, they're desperate because Romania under George Simeon would not follow the diktats of Europe. He would put the Romanian people first, which is why I supported him. I support all national leaders that put their countries first, those that stand up for the people, their rights and their wishes. And that will not happen under Nicolae. He is a puppet of the EU. He is a placeman. He's an administrator for globalist policies. And he will do no favors to the Romanian people. And one of the things that we saw was a massive interference from Macron. Durov, who heads up Telegram, made it very clear that he was willing to go and testify. And George Simeon and his campaign team and his legal team actually asked for the election to be investigated because the results, as you've quite correctly pointed out, were so askew. Just 2 weeks, he was polling 40.8%. And all of a sudden, it turned around and the cursor down won, so-called win. But the thing is, that doesn't add up. And whether Grok says it or whether another chat program says it, the point is the people were saying it. There was unprecedented levels of support in Romania. I saw that. I spoke to the people on the ground, in the streets, in the rural areas. And there is no question of it. That election was stolen, in my opinion.
Now they're trying to get rid of Oban in Hungary, and there are some signs that his popularity is dipping. The Trojan horse of European Union NGOs are, of course, teeming in Hungary. If you look up it's a very beautiful city, Budapest, as we now both know. If you look up any old mansion buildings, There's a plethora of brass plates, clearly funded by the West, by the European Union. They're obviously looking for the possibility of bringing him down. Did you get a sense of that when you were there?
Absolutely, yes, for sure. What you're saying there is 100% accurate. Of course, Viktor Orban knows that. His parliamentarians are aware of it. George Soros and his NGOs were effectively ejected, along with other nations like Russia, to good effect, but they're still around. And there are others who are looking to bring Orban down because he is a strong leader. They don't want strong, nationalistic, sovereign-minded leaders in charge of countries. What they want is World Economic Forum globalist administrators running these countries so that they have the command and control. And they don't like decentralized power. They want centralized power at all times, run from Brussels. But, you know, Viktor Orban and his team are very aware of what's going on. And, of course, Poland and many other nations support him. I was at CPAC as well, George, for a few days there in Budapest. And there is massive amounts of international support for Viktor Orban. He spoke at CPAC. He was joined by many guests there. And there's a general feeling that because it was titled The Age of Patriots, I think it was a brilliant title. And I think it is showcasing the fact that patriots around the world, as I've been discovering with my own movement, Freedom Train International, is attracting massive support there. So the globalists are going to have a fight on their hands, but we must never underestimate them. They're cunning, they're dangerous, and they're utterly ruthless.
Well, as I said in the beginning, we're not on the same side politically, though we do share common enemies, and the globalists are definitely among them. One globalist leader, and I want to talk about a second in a minute, but one globalist leader that's definitely not a patriot and definitely not a leader, and that is Emmanuel Macron. We now know who wears the breeks, as we say in Scotland, the trousers in their household. Who packs the biggest right hook? It's Mrs. Macron. She's not as nice as she looks. He is presiding over a rapidly diminishing political base, and yet his main opposition is now legally banned from running for president at the next presidential polls, leaving open the possibility that with around about 19 or 20% of the poll at the moment, he could still be back in again, or his party might nominate another. How do you see the situation in France? I ask because I saw your statements about the human zoo that was on the streets of Paris last night, in which people were murdered. I've watched videos of people actually lynching other people. There were hundreds of serious injuries and hundreds of arrests. And this was celebrating a victory for the Paris team, well-deserved one, in the Champions League final. But it wasn't really about football, the events of last night, was it?
It wasn't, George. It's horrific to see, and I echo those sentiments of disgust at what we witnessed there. You know, the French people are great people. I love them, and I love all the Europeans. But they are indeed facing massive destabilization by Macron. He is a globalist through and through. He doesn't care about them. I witnessed the Gilets Jaunes movement, the yellow vests. They were brutalized. The farmers, those that grow the food, that produce the crops, and farm the animals, once again, they're being sidelined. There is major problems in France right now. And Marine Le Pen, you know, is a strong leader. She would probably win against him if we were being really honest about it. And I think that this whole lawfare that we're seeing being perpetrated against nationalistic, patriotic leaders is the game plan that the globalists use to destabilize and take out their political opponents. But it's not game over yet. France is witnessing unprecedented chaos in the streets of Paris right now, but it isn't just confined to Paris, George. It is potentially going to spread further. And indeed, the entire West is a powder keg right now. You know, there is so much going on. But Marine Le Pen is a fighter. She's a patriot. She's a warrior. I have huge respect for her, and I hope that she can overcome this legal challenge and at least stand and run to become president of France. I will certainly be supporting her in that mission.
Well, they might use this lawfare against Farage to return to him, mightn't they? The Reform Party are warning of unprecedented buffeting and attacks to come. I mean, you and I both know, Nigel, it wouldn't be that hard to find something you could trump up a charge on.
George, we're all vulnerable to that. You, me, Nigel Farage, and I remember you defending Nigel a number of years ago, just before the Brexit election took place. And I think you were responding to an interview you were doing, and they said, well, Nigel Farage is a fascist and he's far right and all of these things. And you quite adamantly said that you had been around the political circuit for a long time. You have huge knowledge of Nigel and you've met him personally. And you said he's not a fascist, he's not a racist, he's a populist. I remember the words distinctly. And yes, he is. But of course, when the globalist movements start to feel threatened, they are quite capable of targeting individuals that they see as a potential threat. He is like a rock star. When I was campaigning in Barnsley East in the target seat there, he came up on 2 occasions. And he does have a magnetic draw. People are attracted to him, and his power of oratory and his charisma is second to none. So there is always that possibility that he will be targeted in a similar fashion. But once again, he is a fighter. And I think he would be the kind of change that the country needs. I'm not a member of any political party now, George, but I'm watching very closely what is happening to the fortunes of Reform UK, and they are making headway. And of course, we've still got several years to go before the general election takes place. But I think he might be the change that's needed. At least he would put the people of the United Kingdom first for a change.
Finally, Starmer, who's the other side of the coin, or the other cheek of the arse to Macron, he's in deep trouble now, isn't he? Social problems, as you say, this powder keg. I feel it myself. If this event in Liverpool, for example, had been committed by an Islamist extremist, we'd probably be in Britain right in the middle of horrific events. As it is, we don't quite know what happened there. I don't know if you have any insight on that. But Britain is a powder keg, and we've got a Prime Minister far more interested in wars abroad than he is dealing with the crises, multiple crises that exist at home. What's your reading on him?
Oh, I don't think he's going to last, but what is the alternative? They will have somebody else ready to take his place. I'm quite sure Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is busy slavering in the mouth to take over as Prime Minister. I think she probably would be as bad, if not a whole lot worse. Starmer is a traitor to the United Kingdom. He's a traitor to the working class. We just go back to a point that you made, George, about us not necessarily always agreeing on certain things, and that's true. But you might be surprised to know that actually I probably agree with about 80% of what you talk about, especially when it comes to putting the working classes first and giving them the support. Starmer is a betrayer to the working people of this country. Sir Keir Hardie would be spinning in his grave if he came back and saw what the Labour Party has become. And in fact, the Labour Party and the Tory Party are just uniparties. They're no longer Tory, they're no longer Labour. There's something else that serves foreign interests, usually from Brussels' points of view. So I don't know that he's going to last the full term. I think the 3 Ukrainian young boys who apparently set fire to his property, I think there's a lot more to come out about that. I think there's a lot more to come out about Starmer, full stop. But I pay tribute to you and to MOATS Television for all the work that you're doing, George. I'm glad to have been on with you, and I certainly follow what you're saying. And I appreciate the work that you're doing to highlight these important issues. And let's hope that we don't see an escalation in Russia. That provocation that Ukraine just did is probably one of the most serious. I was watching your comments earlier on in your Twitter feed when you said that this could be the Pearl Harbor or this could initiate a massive response. The only true path is the path to peace. And I just wish that President Trump and President Vladimir Putin would be allowed to bring it to a conclusion. Zelensky doesn't want peace. Starmer doesn't want peace. And neither do the European globalist elites either. But let's hope that cooler heads prevail.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much kindly for your comments. Jim Ferguson, founder of Freedom Train International, a guy whose influence is certainly growing. Jim, thanks for joining us. Let's take a quick break, then your calls, and then Gayatri on the social media news roundup. And I have promised her that I won't in any way interrupt her or seek to finish her sentences by popular demand, if you know what I mean. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, you've only got 10 minutes, or Nigel Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister. Will Farage be the next Prime Minister? Yes or no? Get voting on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. It's a close run thing. Now, our podcast is in the top 10 in South Africa, Morocco, and Bulgaria this week. How about that? Yeah, it's amazing. South Africa, Morocco, and Bulgaria. Top 10 charting in the podcast charts. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. But you can also listen to the weekly podcast on the moats.tv website. And once you've listened, please don't forget to leave a review, and you can leave a donation, as I know you will. On line 1 is Vess in Boston, Massachusetts, rather than Lancashire, I'm guessing. He wants to talk about Ukraine. Go ahead, Vess.
Yes, I'm Vessi, and
Vess?
I'm from the Vessi, Y at the end, and I am from the aforementioned Bulgaria. So I'm speaking on behalf of the 80. Yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of the 5-6 millions in Bulgaria and 3-4 millions outside of Bulgaria. We have a current problem. It may look a little problem, but how can we save our Bulgarian money called Bulgarian left if we are forced by the European Union to go and use the European euro? And we don't have much time because there is a meeting coming on Wednesday, and we are forced, although there are big demonstrations, but the leaders want to eliminate the little left of the Bulgarian side, the Bulgarian left. What else should we do besides demonstrating, writing letters, etc.? And do you have any suggestions? You never suffered of using the euros, but we want to keep Bulgarian left and not to be complete slaves and vassals to the European Union.
Well, this was a surprise call. It's an issue that I'm familiar with. I have a great love for Bulgaria. I'm a student of the life of Georgy Dimitrov. I have followed Bulgarian politics all of my life and its history also. And I too want to preserve Bulgarian independence and sovereignty. And I fear it is in very great danger. Gayatri and I were very recently in Bulgaria. And I've actually got some lev in my my wardrobe in one of my coat pockets. And I discovered that, of course, it's jolly difficult to get anyone to change it here in Britain. But if I were you, and if I were the Bulgarian people, I would cling to and support your currency. Anyone who goes voluntarily into the Eurozone is becoming a vassal, is becoming a slave. If you don't control your own currency, if unelected people control it, control its value through supply, control the rates of interest and all fiscal and monetary aspects of your currency, you're not an independent country at all. And Bulgaria, having struggled to get its independence, is in danger through its government, which is a globalist government, a WEF inclined government, is in real danger of losing that. The only country in Europe currently successfully resisting the EUization of its society is Serbia. And even there are powerful forces seeking to force the Serbian people onto their knees. I could mention my own country, your own country now, of Great Britain, but although we've exited the European Union sure hasn't exited us. Thank you for that call. Comments on tonight's poll. Naeem Salam says, Keir Starmer or Nigel Farage, which road to nowhere do you want? Well, I'm opposed to both men, and I am opposed to the road to nowhere that both of them represent. I represent a different road, a third road, if you like. I consider that the right populists like Meloni, like Le Pen, like Farage, are fooling the people. They are a kind of political fool's gold. They seem to be different from the globalists, and yet they support the economic and foreign policies of the globalists, which would leave us in exactly the same place. Our opposition to Nigel Farage is not like Labour's. Labour's is a kind of fey, pearl-clutching, liberal hand-wringing. Our opposition to Nigel Farage is based on class. We represent the workers, the working class, and Nigel Farage does not. Still less does Zia Youssef, his next in line. Anybody who thinks Richard Tice stands up for the working class is fooling themselves or seeking to fool the rest of us. Their economic policies are even worse than Starmer's. They intend to fully privatize what is left of the British Health Service. Starmer hides the privatization of the NHS. Farage boasts about it, puts it center stage in his political program. But we do have some things in common with Farage. Probably more things than we do with Starmer. But we are opposed to both of them. We want to smash the Uni Party, yes. And in Scotland, there's three cheeks to that arse. Tory, Labour and SNP are all three of them slaves to neoliberal orthodoxy, to the EU and to NATO. So I hope in the forthcoming by-election in Hamilton that all three of them get their arses kicked. And I hope in the Scottish Parliament elections next May that people will vote for our candidates. We will have candidates, I'm sure. But that they should vote for anybody other than the Uni party. And I say the same about any elections that come up in Britain. Vote for anybody except the Uni party. That's the only way. If we don't break this Uni party dictatorship, we're never going to get out of the steep decline in which our country and our society are currently engaged in. More comments on tonight's poll. Kilo 1KO says they will never let Farage be Prime Minister. They will do to him like they did to that chap in Romania. Like Ursula once said, quote, the EU has tools. Yeah, they might, but it would be a very dangerous thing to do. The British people are a sleeping giant, but even a sleeping giant might one day wake up. Walter Keating says, Nigel Farage is Boris Johnson with a better haircut. Well, he's definitely got a better haircut, but I see the similarity, Walter. Christina Hines says, British voters are amongst the most misinformed and uninformed voters in the world, in which case Farage may, unfortunately, be Prime Minister. That will definitely be an end to the National Health Service. And Favid Greenwood says, Garage would be the ideal leader of a Vichy-style British government. Okay, the poll is closing, and here's the answer. 20,441 of you have voted. Will Farage be the next Prime Minister? On Telegram, it remained 50-50, exactly. On X, it was 54 yes, 46 no. On the YouTube community poll, 58% yes, 42% no. And on the YouTube stream, exactly 50-50. How about that then? Nigel Farage, good news for him. Malik is in London. Will Israel bring us into World War III? Asks he. Malik, go ahead, sir.
Good evening, George. How you doing?
All right, good. Thank you. Hope you're enjoying the show. It's a very big audience tonight. One of the biggest ever.
I am. Thank you for having me on. Obviously, since the 7th of October, we've been fed with this propaganda nonsense from the Western media. And funny enough, what I discovered was Israeli media outlets were actually far more honest about Israel. So I thought, let me see what's going on in this crazy nation state. And one thing that I discovered is that this particular Israeli government, George, are perhaps the most extremist, fanatical, messianic, zealous government that they've ever had. And it's because of two guys in their government. One guy, that's name is Bezalel Smotrich, and another guy called Itamar Ben-Gvir. And these two guys, they want to do some stuff that's quite scary, to be honest. And there's some conflict within Israel between Orthodox Jews and the Messianic Jews. And Smotrich and Ben-Gvir represent the Messianic Jews. And what they want to do is bring what their version of the end of times are quickly. But the Orthodox Jews are like, no, you're not allowed to do this. This goes against the religion. And it involves something to do with cows. And I remember I was watching a video of one of the Hamas representatives talking about that. And he said, the Israelis, they bring cows to the Holy Land. And at first I was thinking, what the hell are they talking about, cows? I mean, it's ridiculous. Do they not like beef? And afterwards, once I started to read more about it, It's a ritual that they do where they have to bring like a red heifer that's never been bred, never been worked. I could be wrong. I could be misquoting it. And they have to burn it on the Mount of Olives before they could build the Temple Mount. And in order to build the Temple Mount, what do they have to do? They have to destroy Masjid al-Aqsa. And I saw this article written by David, what was his name again? David Landau. I think I'm saying his name incorrectly. He's a British-Israeli journalist. He passed away in 2016 or 2017. In the mid-90s, there was a cow, never been worked, never been bred, spotless red all over. And people believed this was the cow, to burn it, do the ritual, and then go destroy Masjid al-Aqsa. And he wrote an article where he said, somebody go and shoot that cow in the head. Get a gun, put a bullet in the back of that cow's head, because this cow will cause craziness and terrorist attacks. And this is something that's very controversial amongst the Jewish community in Israel.
Well, not only is it controversial, but you're the only person other than myself who seems to be keeping an eye on it. You didn't get anything wrong about it. In fact, everything you said was correct, but I've got bad news for you. Whether that particular cow in the mid-90s ever survived, there are 2 more spanking new red heifers in Jerusalem right now, specially bred. Where else? In the United States. Where else? In Texas, and now transported to Jerusalem, and they are there in a stable in West Jerusalem. And if these maniacs ever got the chance, and who knows if and when they ever will get the chance, they would take these 2 red heifers up to the walls of the Al-Aqsa, and they would slaughter them there, and they would burn them there, and they would use the ashes as their, as it were, a biblical pass to storm into the compound and begin destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the 3rd holiest place in the religion of Islam. And then, you're right, hell would break loose. It probably would be the end of times, not least because 2 billion religious Muslims would be uncontrollable, literally uncontrollable, if Al-Aqsa was destroyed. And it's the fear of that which has so far restrained the Israeli government. But you got one other thing, slightly not wrong, but less than perfectly correct. First of all, Smotrich is not currently in the government, or Ben Gvir is not currently in the government. One or other of them goes in and out of the government, depending on how vicious Netanyahu is behaving on that particular day. There's a revolving door for these 2 ministers. But here's where you didn't get it quite right. I've known many Israeli governments. Golda Meir, a Labour prime minister, was the prime minister when I began to get involved in this subject. It doesn't matter whether the prime minister is Labour or Likud. It doesn't matter whether it's Golda Meir, whether it is Shimon Peres, or whether it is Ariel Sharon, or whether it is Benjamin Netanyahu. The state of Israel and the state of Israeli public opinion is such that any Israeli government is going to pursue the same genocidal policies towards the Palestinians in their midst. Why? Because they must. Because the Palestinian people are the true legitimate owners of the land. And they have stolen that land from the Palestinians. They have driven the Palestinians to the 4 corners of the earth. And unfortunately for them, there are 7 million Palestinians left within the whole boundary of what was Palestine. So they have to get rid of the true owners of the land, or else they can never relax. A thief of a house and a land can never relax if the people he stole the house from are living behind barbed wire at the bottom of his garden, because they will always fear that one day that barbed wire might be cut. So it won't solve the problem getting rid of Ben-Gvir or Smotrich. It won't solve the problem getting rid of Netanyahu, which God himself might be about to do. He's got stage 3 cancer of the bowels. He can pass away at any time. But whoever comes in his place will pursue the same policies. We've got 76 years of experience to tell us that. But a great call, Malik, and very good audio, I must say. I congratulate you on it. A big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been onto the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Neville Hamilton, Shireen Kreshan, Roger Boniface, Rebecca Corridan, and Tom Loughran. Thank you, every single one of you, for your donations, and a big thank you in advance to all those who, at the end of the show, are going to leave their donation. Even if it's £1, €1, $1, we'll be grateful for it. Harjot is in Canada on the war. Go ahead, Harjot.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Galloway. Sorry, how are you doing today?
By the grace of God, good, thanks. What would you like to say?
I just wanted to talk a bit about kind of world politics and the wars that we have among us in general. I just wanted to briefly mention the entire way the system is just nothing but a giant scam, the way that we look at it. It's like we have the left and the right parties, and they're basically playing tug-of-war with a noose around our necks. No war generally benefits the common person. All they really do is enrich the warmongers and such. Like every soldier suited and booted is 20,000 in their pockets. They don't care whether we die. They don't care whether we get injured. None of that really matters to them. And at some point, we have to recognize what's really happening in the world. And we got to stop being divided over nonsense antics that they have us divided on. Like I said, you have the right party and the left party. The left party will always push for their women's rights, and by all means, that's all they should do, just that. But then the right party would push towards their ideologies, and they always keep us divided on those two main factors. Though while simultaneously the noose around our necks get tighter and tighter. And I just wanted to briefly just mention that the whole system itself is just corrupt in ways that's unimaginable. And the world...
Well, you've spoken very eloquently. A young man back in the early 1960s wrote a song about it. His name was Bob Dylan, and the song was Masters of War. I hope you've heard it, but if you haven't, do play it. Masters of War makes exactly the point that you just made, that the masters of war, who never see war, who never hear war, who never taste or feel the blood of war, who never suffer through war, merely profit through war. And the governments that represent them, the Western governments that represent these masters of war, are compelled or are in any case convinced of the importance of their hegemony, their domination of the globe and of its resources, that they are more than happy to go along with a diet of never-ending war. And that's what we have got. It's been one long bloody war. One long bloody war. The whole of this century, and don't get me started on the last, the whole of this century has been one long bloody war. And the danger is that it will lead to a war of such existential proportions that none of us survive it, that none of us live through it, and that any in the wilds of the mountains and the forests of Canada who might survive the blast, who might even avoid the radiation, will not avoid the nuclear winter thus produced. So you're right. They have hot button issues. Sadly, it's no longer women's rights because the so-called centrists, the liberals, the social democrats, have abandoned women's rights, handing those rights to men who claim to be women instead. That's the new hot button culture war issue. We in the Workers' Party, we try to stay above culture war, identity politics issues by insisting that if all of the workers of the world, and by workers I mean by hand or by brain, don't think because you work in a bank you're not a worker. Don't think because you're a civil servant you're not a worker. No, don't think because somebody told you you were middle class that you're not a worker. I'm talking about everyone who depends upon their labor to live, who, if they had no wages this week, they had no salary this month, would quickly be plunged into poverty, who have no other means of living other than what they earn from their work. You are all workers. And if we all combined, the world would be ours. Which is a good point for me to throw to Gayatri in the studio with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Let's start with street justice. This was the tweet posted by the Irish mixed martial arts fighter Paddy McCrory, because last night he fought in Rome against the Israeli MMA fighter Shuki Farage, and he won. He defeated him. Farage prior was undefeated, but last night MMA Paddy McCrory not just finished him on the box in the ring. He then walked around with victory at the Palestinian flag, and it is said that he during the final knockout, he shouted "a baby killer" at him and "free Palestine." Now, this Shuki Farage is not just a win and a victory because he is an Israeli, but because he was an actual IDF fighter, as displayed in this picture, which he himself posted on his Instagram proudly.
He looks hard there, but he wasn't so hard in the ring, was he?
So, as the location on this picture, he says Gaza City, and as a description, he says, to celebrate my 25th birthday tomorrow in a place like this, I didn't think I would get it. And an emoticon of a fire. So that was him proudly standing in Gaza in his IDF outfit, but then defeated in the ring in Rome last night by the Irish man from West Belfast. It's a proud moment because, you know, these IDF soldiers, they keep flaunting, being in the battlefield and rummaging through the private property of the houses that they destroyed of the Palestinians and they sent away, and doing the most disgusting things and posting these pictures on their social media. And then as a result, you get this, that he gets defeated and then Shuki then had to delete his or deactivate his social media accounts. It happens a lot. All these IDF soldiers, when they get their break, they go on holidays, but then when they're found out to be from Israel and of a young age, of an age, military age, they get called for that. So this was a wonderful victory by our Irishmen in Rome last night. Now on to the next Farage. Will Nigel Farage be the next Prime Minister of the UK? Frederick Wimsey-Bird says Farage is an agent of chaos. In the right place, he can be extremely effective, like in the European Parliament. In other cases, he will be chaotically destroying the existing order. But he doesn't have the power to build anything new, because leaders need to be builders. And Brokey Dagan says, I think so, George. The lesser of two evils, insanity, is over forever. They freak people over too much, and I think the zombies are finally waking up. I like it. People like yourself and Farage are pushing different parties that aren't winners by default, but by competence.
That's kind.
Now, that's kind, yes.
I'm a bit, you've met Farage too. I'm a bit surprised at how popular he is. But let's not get it out of perspective. He's got 31% of the poll. which is hardly, not even a majority, never mind, really popular. And in his popularity ratings, there are far more people who don't like him than like him. But it is quite an achievement to have finally made it into Parliament and now have 5 MPs on his small bench. And to be ahead of not 1 but 3 other parties is quite an achievement. He's a cheeky chappy. He's a likeable enough cove. He smokes, he drinks, he laughs a lot. But Jim called him earlier an orator. I've got to tell you, an orator he is not. He's quite good in close quarters. He's good when he meets people, but he ain't no orator. And he ain't no thinker either. He has no real ideas. He is a right-wing national populist, like Meloni, like the AFD, like Le Pen in France. And they claim to be anti-globalist, but oddly, they support all the wars that the globalists are waging.
Exactly.
They claim to be anti-globalist, but they support the same economic system that globalism is the highest expression of, namely the capitalist system. None of them want an alternative to the capitalist system, and therefore their opposition to globalism is merely about culture war issues.
Yeah.
It's only about pronouns, really.
Well, there is a part of the audience that are a bit, as you said, a bit ambiguous about that. Is he really what he proclaims to be, or is he part of the establishment? Ivan Ivanovich Chernov says he will be taken down or dropped out before it happens because he is controlled opposition. Controlled. And Central scrutinizes says no, they will get buckets of votes, but it will not get past 40 seats. Even if Farage and the party reform were not inventions of our deep state and were honest libertarians, the masses are too stupid, but also too evil to stand up and vote for freedom. All of their policies are status quo. Michael Sheridan says Farage is the UK's Trump and is exactly what will kill our nation. We don't need more of the same old establishment, sheepdogs keeping us in line, dividing one working from their fellow worker using race, faith, or some other differences. We don't need a dinosaur Trump, we need a tiger Traore. Speaking of Traore, he made it to the Financial Times and he is described as a saint. Imagine. Last week, Financial Times headlines was The Cult of Saint Traore, how a Russian-backed junta leader became an icon.
Cry more, FT. No FT, no comment.
No. So yeah, that's...
Have you got any more?
Well, I do, but actually we do have... Oh no, I thought we had another call coming up, but we do have another call coming up. I thought we had another call coming up, but if not, okay. Well, I just want to say that last show we promoted the Hats Off account, so please go.
Hats Off. We need you to follow it.
That's Hats Off with 4 Fs.
4 Fs.
Okay.
Hats Off. There it is.
See you there.
So look for it on Twitter. There's a bit more to it than our normal Twitter output. Yeah, we're making videos, we're clipping. So there's a fair bit of work going into it, and then we retweet it, and we're hoping that you'll start to follow it and retweet it yourself without me having to do it, or without Gayatri having to do it. We're covering the main topics of the day, and as the name suggests, it is kind of us with our hair down.
It is.
Those of us who've got hair.
Hats off or hair down.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for being with us tonight. A record audience. Been marvelous for us. Hope it was for you. And if it was, then we hope you'll join us again on Wednesday for the next edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows. Be part of the biggest audience of its kind in the whole world. Thanks very much. See you then.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.